Welcome back to the deep dive, where we take these complex subjects and, the huge stack of sources you send us, and we just extract the critical knowledge.
The key insights.
Exactly, giving you that shortcut to being, well, truly well informed. Today, we are tackling a massive, and I think you called it an insidious roadblock.
It really is. It stops millions of otherwise highly motivated learners right in their tracks.
Yeah, whether they're learning Spanish, Mandarin, or, let's be honest, most commonly English, it's this mental obstacle that feels completely logical.
Oh, totally rational. But it's an absolute trap.
Think about your own learning journey, right? The logical way to think about it goes something like this. Okay, I need to master the inputs. I will study all my grammar rules, meticulously.
I'll get all the vocabulary.
And only when I reach this kind of mythical, flawless state of fluency, then I'll finally feel confident.
Right. Then I can open my mouth and have a conversation. It feels safe. It feels really sensible.
But what if that whole sequence is just backward?
Completely backward.
What if waiting for that imaginary fluency certificate is actually the single biggest thing preventing you from ever getting there?
That's it.
So today we are diving deep into the cognitive, the psychological mechanics of language acquisition, and we're looking at sources that just completely dismantle this comfortable but crippling belief.
And that's the core mission for this deep dive. For you, the ambitious learner, we're pulling out that one critical insight. Confidence is not some reward you get for fluency.
Right.
It is, and this is so counterintuitive, it's a prerequisite for making any real progress.
Prerequisite.
Wow. The consensus across all these sources, from polyglots to linguistic coaches, it's crystal clear. This traditional way of thinking, waiting for perfection, they all call it a trap.
A trap that actively stalls you.
Severely. It stalls your entire learning curve. So we're going to figure out how we can fundamentally flip that equation.
Okay.
We'll start by unpacking this kind of counterintuitive truth, and define what confidence even means if it's not about accuracy. Then we'll spend a good amount of time on what the sources call the perfection paradox. The irony of using perfectionism as an excuse for silence.
Yes, finally.
Most critically, we'll break down the specific, actionable psychological steps. This is backed by behavioral science, and it shows exactly how that simple and, let's be honest, terrifying act of taking action can cultivate immediate compounding self-assurance.
So get ready to stop waiting for fluency.
And start building confidence. Today.
Okay, let's unpack this common assumption, starting with the trap itself. We know the belief is that you have to be fluent before you can be confident. That's like the default setting for most people.
It's the emotional default, for sure. It feels safest.
But why is it so widespread? Where does that fear of failure, where does it come from?
Well, it's deeply rooted on the sources called the performance mindset versus the growth mindset.
A performance mindset.
Yeah, as a society, we're just culturally conditioned to see any public display of a skill as a performance. Like you have to be totally prepared before you step out on that stage.
And school reinforces that, doesn't it?
Massively. Think about how we learned language in school. It was always a test.
Right, you get marked down for every mistake.
Exactly. You miss an answer, you get penalized. So when we enter a real conversation, our brain anticipates that same penalty.
But it's not a grade, it's, a social penalty.
A social penalty, shame, awkwardness, judgment, all of that. So the desire for fluency really is a desire for a kind of protective shield, a linguistic armor against that social risk.
So you're basically looking for someone to tell you you're good enough so you don't get penalized.
You're seeking external validation, exactly.
And that logic, it holds up internally, right? I have to master the measurable goal, the grammar, the vocabulary to get the emotional reward of confidence. But you mentioned something critical. Fluency isn't a static target. That's the real flaw here, isn't it?
It absolutely is. That's the core of the problem. Fluency isn't some object you can just pick up off a shelf.
It's not a checklist.
Not at all. It's a continuous moving horizon. The second you define fluency as perfection, you've created an impossible standard.
No native speaker speaks perfectly all the time.
Never. But for the learner, that goal of zero errors becomes this gatekeeper to even trying.
And the sources are really clear on this. They call it a trap that actively stalls your progress. So let's talk about the consequences of waiting. Is it just that you learn slower, or is it something worse?
Oh, it's far more detrimental than just being slow. It creates a state of perpetual inaction.
The knowledge-action gap.
That's it, the knowledge-action gap. If fluency is the gatekeeper to confidence, but fluency is this impossible moving target, well, the gate just never opens.
So the learner just waits.
They wait, and they keep postponing the one activity speaking that would actually lead to fluency.
And they retreat into things that feel like work, but aren't really the work that matters.
Exactly. They retreat to these highly controlled environments. They'll consume content, do grammar drills, review flashcards endlessly.
Believing they're preparing.
Right. They think you're being diligent.
Right.
But in reality, they're just procrastinating. They're avoiding that social risk.
I've seen that gap so many times. Can we get specific on what that looks like? Someone might have spent years studying in school, so they genuinely have a lot of knowledge in their head.
They absolutely do. They might have, say, a B2 or even a C1 level in reading.
So upper intermediate, advanced, they can understand complex stuff.
Yeah, but because they've never actually taken the risk of speaking, their production skill, their actual ability to have a conversation, is stuck way back at A1 or A2.
The true beginner level.
The true beginner level. They have all the mental tools, but they lack the physical, the neurological capacity to use them in real time.
It's like having all the parts to a car, but never learning how to drive.
Perfect analogy. The brain hasn't learned the motor skills to connect the ear, the mouth, and that huge internal library in, fraction of a second.
So the trap isn't just that you learn slowly.
The trap is that you never truly start the performance part of learning. You're just stuck in prep mode forever.
Okay, so this is where we need to make that cognitive flip. One of our sources, an English coach, puts it so bluntly. They say, confidence is not fluency. You don't need to wait for anything to be confident. You don't need perfect grammar or a vast vocabulary. Just speak with what you have.
And that just challenges the core assumption, doesn't it?
Completely. It says confidence isn't the reward you get at the end. It's something you have to bring with you to the starting line. So how should a learner redefine confidence in this context?
They have to decouple it from accuracy. Confidence here isn't a measure of your linguistic perfection.
So what is it a measure of?
It's a measure of your risk tolerance and your belief that you can get your message across regardless of how you get there.
So it's a mindset.
It's a mindset and it's a habit, totally independent of what language level you're at. Fluency is the skill you've accumulated. The size of your vocabulary, the correctness of your grammar.
And confidence is?
Confidence is the willingness to use whatever little skill you have right now. The sources are so clear that self-assurance grows not by waiting, but by using the language. And crucially, by making mistakes and seeing that the world doesn't end.
So it's the habit of choosing to try, even when you're not sure.
That's the habit that builds self-assurance. You stop waiting for some external thing, like a test score, to tell you you're ready. You start generating your own validation through action.
Let's spend some real time on that anecdotal example they give, because I think everyone has seen this.
Oh, it's universal.
Think of those people who boldly speak in broken English. They may not be fluent, but their confidence successfully carries them through conversations. We all know someone like this.
We do. Maybe it's a tourist asking for directions, or a business person in a meeting.
Their genders are mixed up, tenses are all over the place, pronunciation is a bit rough.
But they command the room, and you understand them perfectly.
They are effective communicators, so what does their success tell us about confidence versus, pure accuracy?
It tells us that communication is driven way more by delivery, which is confidence, than by pure grammatical accuracy.
Right.
In human communication, only a small fraction of the meaning is actually in the words themselves. The rest is. It's nonverbal. It's your tone, your posture, your enthusiasm, your intent.
So when that person with broken English steps up,
They're signaling something powerful. They're signaling, my message is important and I believe I can get it to you. That confidence, it acts like a buffer for the listener.
a cognitive buffer, you mean?
Yeah. The listener picks up on that strong intent, and they lean in. They work a little harder to understand, and they become incredibly forgiving of the mistakes.
Because they know the goal is just getting the meaning across.
They know the speaker is prioritizing the transfer of meaning over the technical rules of the language.
And you know what's funny? Sometimes that confident, broken English is actually more effective than someone who speaks perfectly but is super hesitant.
Oh, absolutely. Think about it. Someone with perfect grammar who's mumbling, they're hesitant, constantly correcting themselves, looking down.
It's painful to listen to.
It is. They're signaling uncertainty. The listener has to strain, and the whole thing just feels like hard work.
Whereas the bold person,
The bold person has simplified the whole equation. They're making the communication attempt easy to receive. The bolder the delivery, the more forgiving the audience. So the goal for the learner has to pivot immediately.
From what to what?
Stop prioritizing 100% accuracy. Start prioritizing 100% successful transfer of meaning.
So we've established the core mistake, seeing fluency as a test to pass, instead of seeing communication as a goal to achieve.
And that defining fluency as perfection makes it an impossible prerequisite.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we need a different way to measure success.
Precisely. And that brings us right into our next section, which explores why this whole chase for perfection actually sabotages the very mechanics of learning.
This idea of prioritizing meaning over accuracy, it leads us straight into the next big psychological hurdle, what the sources call the perfection paradox.
The perfection paradox.
It's all about the deep irony of waiting to be good enough.
Right.
The paradox, as they define it, is this. If a learner is always waiting to reach some arbitrary, mistake-free level of good enough, they will literally never speak.
Ever. It's a perfect airtight system for self-sabotage.
If you need perfection to start, but you need practice and mistakes to get to perfection.
You've just built an unbreakable wall. You can't get in. It's the ultimate intellectual excuse for avoidance.
What do you mean by that?
Well, the brain wants to be efficient and safe, right?
Right.
It wants to avoid that social penalty we talked about. So it sets the bar at an impossible height.
So demanding perfection is just a smart way to justify staying quiet.
It's a completely rational-sounding reason to stay silent. And that silence guarantees the learner stays in that passive consuming mode, always taking in knowledge, but never, ever generating output.
And what's so critical for our listener to get here is that inverse relationship you mentioned.
Yes, that speaking despite the imperfections is the only way to get fluent. It's not the result of fluency, it's the cause.
So if you don't use the language,
Your brain has no way to find the gaps. And just as importantly, your conversation partner can't help you find them either. Language learning isn't about, passively filling up a gas tank with knowledge
it's about building a network.
and stress testing that network in real time. And to stress test something, you need friction. You need failure.
Okay, but let me push back a little here, introduce some tension. A lot of traditional language programs, they really hammer on getting grammar right early on.
To prevent bad habits. Yeah.
Right. So isn't there a risk that by just, throwing in a bunch of words, hoping it makes sense, that you might actually cement bad habits that are harder to fix later?
That's a great question. It's a vital one. And it speaks directly to the fear of what's called fossilization, which is a real thing.
So the concern is legitimate.
It is. But what the research shows is that the risk of fossilization is so much less damaging than the guaranteed outcome of paralysis.
A fixed bad habit is at least a habit. No habit is just nothing.
Exactly. A fixed, incorrect habit is a data point. You can correct it later. Stagnation is just stagnation. And what's more, the sources, backed by cognitive linguistics, they really emphasize that in real-world conversations, that constant, immediate feedback loop corrects habits way faster than fear-induced silence ever could.
Because your listener will eventually give you feedback.
They will. If you make the same mistake over and over, eventually they'll either stop understanding you or they'll gently correct you, and that forces you to refine it.
Which brings us to that core academic point from the sources. Linguists are saying that making mistakes isn't just something that happens, it's essential.
It's essential.
They say the more mistakes you make, the faster you learn. We really need to hammer this home for the listener who has been taught their whole life that mistakes are shameful failures.
We absolutely do. You have to reframe mistakes as high-value data points. They're feedback mechanisms. Think of it like a scientist running an experiment. When their hypothesis is wrong, that's not a disaster. It's the most valuable information they could possibly get.
Because it tells them what not to do next time.
It tells them exactly where to adjust the formula. When you make a mistake in a language, you use the wrong word, you mess up a community. Tends to amazing things happen at once.
Okay.
First, the friction of that error creates a spike of attention in your brain, and second, your listener gives you the correction, either by saying it outright or just by repeating your sentence the right way.
And that correction lands at the exact moment your brain is paying attention to that specific problem.
Which makes it so much more effective than just reading a rule in a textbook. It's highly contextualized learning.
So learning is really a process of, guess and check.
It's exactly that. You generate a linguistic hypothesis, you test it by speaking, you hit some friction or you fail, and then you update your internal rulebook.
And if you never test the hypothesis, if you stay silent,
Your internal rulebook just stays flawed, but you never find out where. The mistakes are the friction that forces your internal grammar engine to get better. So, maximizing mistakes by maximizing use is how you maximize your learning speed.
Wow. So let me just restate that because it's so powerful. If you are actively avoiding speaking because you're afraid of making mistakes,
Mm,
you are by definition actively choosing to learn slower. You're putting comfort ahead of competence. That's the real cost of the perfection paradox.
it really is.
So if mistakes are now redefined as fuel, not failure, then the goal itself has to change.
Fundamentally.
You have to move away from that internal crushing goal of zero mistakes and adopt a new external goal of just communicate.
And that shift alone just lifts this incredible weight off your shoulders.
The pressure's off.
The learner needs a new, achievable metric for success, one they can measure right there in the moment. Success is not, did I use the second conditional tense perfectly?
Right. Success is.
Did my coworker understand the point I was trying to make about the project deadline? It requires you to shift your focus from yourself, from your internal critic, to your audience.
To your partner in the conversation.
Exactly. You're now working with them,
Mhm.
not performing for them. And the beauty of that approach is that it's inherently forgiving.
What do you mean?
If your partner understands 90% of your message, even though you made 20 errors, that's a 100% successful interaction in the world of competence and action.
And the sources give us this incredibly practical advice from the polyglot Lindy Boats to really make this shift concrete.
Yeah, her advice is gold.
She tells learners, point blank, to just abandon that internal critic and embrace the chaos. She says, don't worry about using the right words and grammar each time. Throw in a bunch of words, hoping it makes sense instead of staying quiet.
I love that phrase. Throw in a bunch of words, hoping it makes sense.
It's the perfect antidote to analysis paralysis, isn't it? It encourages momentum over polish.
It's all about accepting that early communication is just messy. It's iterative.
It's permission to fail forward.
It is. If you stop every 2 seconds to mentally search for the right verb conjugation, you cave the flow of the conversation,
And your anxiety just skyrockets.
which usually leads to you just giving up and staying quiet. By throwing in words, you're prioritizing the flow of ideas, you're signaling your intent, you're asserting your presence in the conversation.
And she offers this crucial insight about the other person, that your listener will, more often than not, help you in the right direction.
Yes, and that is such a powerful reframe. We assume the listener is there with a red pen grading us.
When in reality,
They're a friendly co-pilot. They actually want to understand you.
so language isn't a solo test. It's a team sport.
It's a collaborative, supported effort.
Yeah.
When you just show that you're willing to try, native speakers are usually more than happy to do some of the mental work for you. They'll subconsciously offer the right word, or they'll rephrase what you said back to you correctly.
So that scary, high-stakes moment becomes a low-stakes, guided lesson.
Think about it from their perspective.
Mm.
If you pause for a really long time, they get anxious. They don't know if they should jump in. But if you keep the flow going, however messy it is, they can just focus on pulling the meaning out.
So by speaking imperfectly now, you're actually using your listener's brain as a learning tool.
You're maximizing your environmental resources. That's a great way to put it.
So to wrap up the breakthrough from this section, we have to accept that communication is chaotic. We have to use the language now imperfectly,
Because that imperfect action is what generates the mistakes
which are the data points.
that accelerates the whole learning curve towards fluency. And that visible progress, that's what actually fuels your confidence in the long run.
Okay, this is where we tie it all together. This is the critical mechanism, how the act of doing rewires your brain to be confident.
Yes, we're moving from just understanding that mistakes are good to the practical application of how action beats fear and builds that internal sense of, I can do this.
So let's start with what you call the action principle.
We have to reinforce this. Confidence is not something you get and then you start speaking.
It's something you cultivate by speaking.
It's an emergent property of consistent engagement. The analogy I always use is fitness. You don't get strong and then decide to go to the gym.
You go to the gym to become strong.
Confidence is a muscle. You have to work it. So let's go back to that common scenario. The learner with a B2 or C1 reading level, but crippling shyness.
They know what they want to say. The words are in there.
But they can't make them come out. That is the knowledge-action gap in its purest form. The input is there, the output is blocked by fear.
And that fear is real. It's not just, a choice. It's a physical reaction for some people. The sources say that the whole point of speaking, even if your voice is shaking, is to teach your brain that the experience is survivable.
That is the key.
Let's really break that down. Teaching the brain survival. What is that fear response, and how does speaking, even imperfectly, override it?
We're talking about basic biology here, the biology of fear. When you're in a high stakes or a new situation, your amygdala, the brain's little threat detector, it just goes off.
And it doesn't know the difference between social risk and physical risk.
Not at all. Using the wrong verb feels just as dangerous to the amygdala as seeing a tiger. It signals danger because the situation is new and feels high risk. Your brain sees speaking a new language in public as potentially high cost,
The cost being social rejection.
which historically could mean being exiled from the tribe. It's a deep-seated survival instinct, that feeling of a dry mouth, a racing heart, your mind going blank, that's your brain screaming at you to avoid the danger.
And you have to push through that.
You have to override it. And when you do, when you succeed in just one small interaction, you start a psychological process called fear extinction.
Their extinction.
It's basically the process of creating new evidence that proves the brain's original prediction of disaster was wrong. You might be terrified ordering a coffee, but when you walk away with the coffee, your brain has to log the actual result.
Hypothesis. Speaking will lead to disaster. Result. Incorrect. I got my coffee.
Outcome? Survivable. Exactly.
So every single time you speak and you survive, you're feeding your brain new data. You're giving it counter evidence to the amygdala's alarm system.
It's like exposing a smoke alarm to steam from the shower over and over again.
Yeah.
Eventually it learns, oh, that's not fire, that's just steam.
You're desensitizing it.
You are systematically desensitizing your brain to the perceived threat of making a mistake. And the only way to do that is through repeated, real-world testing. That's the biological foundation of overcoming shyness. You are proving, with physical action, that the fear is bigger than the actual risk.
You have to stand next to the steam to learn it's not a fire.
That's it.
And this idea of fear extinction, it ties directly into a ton of research in behavioral psychology. The sources point out that facing your fear in small, manageable steps is what breaks the fear cycle.
Yes, and breaking the cycle is the key. The fear cycle works like this. You feel fear, so you avoid the situation, which reinforces the fear.
Right. Every time you avoid speaking, you're telling your brain, see, that was a good call. That was dangerous.
And the cycle just gets tighter and the fear gets bigger. The only way to break it is through exposure.
But controlled exposure.
Controlled, incremental exposure. Which is why the idea of small wins is so incredibly powerful. These small, successful interactions provide immediate, tangible proof that the risk is manageable and the outcome is good.
We're talking about micro victories.
Tiny things that give you an immediate psychological boost.
So we have to give the listener some examples. A small win is more than just ordering a coffee. It needs to be simple, but it has to be purposeful. What are some specific examples?
Okay, let's categorize them. Category 1, the transactional boost.
Okay.
So you successfully order the coffee, but then you add one little non-essential sentence, like, thank you, this looks great. Or at the grocery store, you ask the cashier, do you know what time you close tomorrow?
Something that forces you to create a new sentence, not just repeat a script.
Exactly. The win is getting a normal, expected answer. Okay, category 2, the social lubricant. This is about low-effort social chatter.
In the office, for example.
Yeah, if you're in a mixed language office, just give a colleague a simple compliment in the target language. Hey, that's a nice shirt. Or, I love that song you're playing. It's brief, the stakes are super low, but it forces you to produce language and you get quick, positive feedback. Category 3, the digital dip. This uses technology to lower the stakes even more.
How so?
Go on a social media forum for one of your hobbies, cooking, gaming, whatever, and just post a simple question or a comment in your target language.
The distance and the time delay take the pressure off.
Right, but you still get feedback and validation from native speakers. Category 4, the directional inquiry. When you're out walking around, just go up to a stranger and ask for simple directions, even if you already know the way.
Excuse me, where's the nearest bus stop?
Perfect. It forces real-time speaking and listening with someone you don't know, but the interaction has a built-in time limit. It's necessarily brief. And finally, category 5, the customer service gambit.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
Call a non-critical customer service line like your local library or a movie theater and just ask a basic question. What are your hours this week? The person on the other end is literally paid to be helpful and patient.
So the interaction is super low risk and very structured.
Exactly.
That's a fantastic range of examples because it shows that a small win opportunity is literally everywhere. And the most important part, you said, is the compounding effect.
It is. You get that first little rush of dopamine, that little boost of self-efficacy from the first win,
And that makes the next one just a tiny bit easier.
of 5% easier,
Yeah.
which makes you more likely to get another win. And it's the virtuous cycle in action. Over time, all these little successes pull you out of that crippling fear cycle and into this powerful new cycle of action leading to confidence, which then fuels more confident action.
You stop seeing yourself as a student who's struggling.
And you start seeing yourself as a speaker who sometimes makes mistakes. That shift in your identity, that's the real confidence certificate.
Okay, so we have to leave the listener with a really clear, actionable takeaway that pulls all of this together. Let's go back to that final quote from the sources. You don't need to be perfect to be confident.
That phrase should be your mantra. It's a direct attack on what I call the flawless myth.
The flawless myth.
Yeah, we have to tell the listener to abandon this illusion that there's some magical moment in the future where all the vocabulary will just download into their brain, the internal critic will go quiet, and they'll suddenly speak flawlessly.
That moment isn't real.
It does not exist. It's a neurological illusion our brains create to justify staying in our comfort zone. The confidence has to come from where you are right now, not from some hypothetical future self.
Okay, so let's use that specific high-stakes example from the sources. Joining a meeting at work. This is where so many learners just retreat into silence, even when they have something important to say.
It's the highest stakes environment for many people.
The default thought is, I'll speak up when I can sound as smart as the native speakers. But applying our new rule means jumping in with simple, direct phrases, even if what comes next is a bit messy. The example they gave was just saying, I have an idea, can I share?
That simple little phrase is brilliant for so many reasons. First, it's A1 level English. The cognitive load is almost zero.
Right.
Second, it's a powerful meta-communicative phrase. It signals that you're engaged, you're assertive, you want to contribute. It makes you visible.
And third,
Most importantly, it buys you time. It gives you psychological permission to pause for a second and gather your thoughts before you deliver the actual idea. You've claimed your right to speak, and now everyone is waiting for your substance, not grading your grammar.
the focus shifts from the perfection of the delivery to the value of the idea itself.
Exactly. And the ultimate proof is that every time a learner takes that small, brave action, whether it's in a meeting or just asking for directions, they prove to themselves that communication is what matters, not perfection.
They realize the world doesn't end if they use the wrong preposition.
They get the floor, they share their idea, and the work moves forward. That successful outcome, which they created through action, that is the confidence certificate they were waiting for. They just had to issue it to themselves.
It creates a new story in their head.
A new internal narrative. I am a communicator, and my imperfect contribution has value. And that new identity makes the next interaction even easier.
This has been an incredibly deep dive. I mean, a real rewiring of how we think about language learning. We started by just challenging that deep-seated belief that fluency creates confidence.
Yeah, and recognizing that waiting for that imaginary perfection is just a trap designed by our own fear.
And we reframed confidence. It's not an achievement, it's a habit you build, totally separate from your current skill level.
We looked at the linguistic reason for being bold, right? Understanding that perfection paradox, the irony that you can only get better by speaking despite your mistakes, because those mistakes are the data you need to learn.
And then we gave the specific psychological tool for change, the action principle. Confidence is built through that compounding effect of small, survivable wins.
Those little interactions that teach your brain, through fear extinction, that the risk is all in your head and the reward of communicating is real.
And we learned that by just focusing on communicating today, right now, you're not just managing your fear, you're actually speeding up the whole learning process.
Since we know mistakes neurologically accelerate learning, refusing to speak now is just actively choosing to learn slower, indefinitely. So we want to leave you with one final thought to help you take that first step. If you can truly accept that every mistake you make is a shortcut to fluency, and that your listener is ready to be your co-pilot,
What simple phrase, what interaction, what low-stakes question can you initiate?
within the next hour, to prove to your own brain that communication is survivable and that what you have to say matters,
Stop preparing.
and start participating.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. We'll see you next time.